Welcome back to Meaningful Whispers. Tonight you drift into a desert older than your dreams, where the air feels thin, as if every grain of sand carries a secret too heavy to say aloud. There is a faint ticking, no, not a clock, but your own heartbeat echoing softly in the silence, mingling with the hush of unseen winds. The horizon is a smear of copper and ash, and just beyond it, you glimpse something sharper than the pyramids you've seen in books, smaller yet somehow more intense. And yes, your ego might not make it through unscathed. These aren't the pyramids of Giza, the postcard icons of a touristic memory. These belong to Nubia, the forgotten sibling of ancient Egypt, where the stones rise steeper, narrower, as though they're trying to pierce the heavens rather than simply impress the earth. So before we dive in, tap that like button and subscribe to Cyphoria, only if these midnight mind voyages truly speak to you. And tell me, where are you right now? What time flickers on your clock? Let's see how far across the map of consciousness we stretch tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of the Nubian desert, your feet sinking slightly into sand that feels warm even under the veil of night. The pyramids of Meroe wait in the distance, their angles cutting the darkness like black teeth. They are smaller than you expect, about half the height of Egypt's Giza pyramids, but so steep they feel unnervingly sharp, like an afterthought from a civilization that didn't care for moderation. You step closer, and the stars seem to follow you, their ancient light the same that guided Kushite kings long ago. These rulers once conquered Egypt itself, wearing the crowns of both lands. Yet they returned here to build something different. Did they rebel against Egyptian grandeur, or did they reinterpret it, distilling its essence into something denser, purer? A gentle breeze brushes your skin. Breathe it in, hold for a moment. Let your shoulders drop as you exhale, as if the desert itself is inviting you to soften, to dissolve into the quiet science of history. Historians say the Nubian pyramids were built around 300 BCE to 350 CE, long after Egypt's prime. But there is an ambiguity. They debate whether the Kushites were imitating Egypt or reviving an even older African tradition. Some argue the steepness reflected spiritual intent, a more direct path for the soul to ascend. Others suggest it was simply a practical adaptation to local building techniques. The truth, like the desert, shifts when you look too closely. Everything deep loves a mask, Nietzsche once wrote, and you sense that here, these pyramids are masks, hiding stories you're not sure you're ready to hear. A soft flicker of memory rises. Victorian explorers stumbling upon these pyramids in the 19th century, expecting Egyptian splendor, but finding something more intimate, more haunting. They describe the silence here as a cathedral without sound, a place where even your own breath feels like an intrusion. You reach out and touch the cool, slanted stone. It's rougher than you imagined. In the moonlight, it seems to drink in shadows rather than reflect them. For a moment, you wonder if the stones themselves are listening. Take another breath. Feel your rib cage expand, your body rooted to the soft, shifting sands beneath you. Imagine that every inhale draws in a fragment of the ancient desert night, and every exhale releases the restless noise of the modern world. As you stand there, you can almost hear whispers carried by the wind, not in a language you know, but in a cadence you recognize, like the lullaby of something much older than time. The pyramids of Nubia don't seek to dominate the skyline like those of Egypt. They don't demand awe in the same way. They invite curiosity. They invite you to lean closer, to wonder why a kingdom that once ruled over Egypt chose to build differently. A small laugh escapes you. It's absurd, isn't it? These pyramids, so much smaller, still manage to feel endless, like staring into a mirror that reflects not your face, but the endless chain of lives that came before you. The desert exhales again, a soft sigh of warm wind, and you let yourself sink deeper into this moment. Nubia's pyramids don't need the grandeur of the Sphinx. They have something quieter, more personal. Perhaps that's why they've been forgotten by many. The world tends to remember only what shouts the loudest. But tonight, you remember them. You drift further into the desert, leaving behind the faint glow of imagined cities and the noise of history's louder empires. The sands here feel endless, stretching like a golden sea under the pale wash of starlight. The Nubian pyramids remain in sight, but now they seem to multiply in your vision, row upon row of steep silhouettes, each one slightly different, like notes in a forgotten song. Your feet crunch softly on the sand, and there's a peculiar comfort in the quiet. You're not entirely alone. The spirits of Kushite queens, called Kandakes, linger in this place, or so the locals once believed. These queens ruled with power equal to any king, their names carved into stone walls now softened by centuries of wind. Some led armies, some negotiated with Rome, and some were buried in these very pyramids, their tombs hidden beneath layers of time and silence. Pause. Feel the air on your skin, warm, dry, yet oddly soothing. Breathe in through your nose, slow and deliberate. Let it fill you, then exhale with the ease of someone who has nowhere else to be. The desert doesn't hurry. Why should you? A mainstream fact drifts into your thoughts. The Kushite kingdom of Meroe became a hub of ironworking and trade, a cultural bridge between Central Africa and the Mediterranean. But what historians still debate is why the kingdom eventually declined. Was it overuse of resources, shifting trade routes, or perhaps a more mysterious cultural unraveling? Scholars still argue whether the silence that followed was gradual or sudden, like a candle dimming or being snuffed out. "Time is the substance I am made of," wrote Borges, and here you can almost feel that truth in your bones. You are made of the same material as the desert's history: dust, memory, and the slow erosion of meaning. There's an unusual anecdote you can't help but recall. In the late 1800s, Giuseppe Ferlini, an Italian treasure hunter, dynamited the tops off several Nubian pyramids in search of gold. He found some, yes, but in doing so, he scarred the skyline forever. Locals saw him as a kind of intruder, a man who couldn't hear the quiet plea of these ancient tombs. Strangely, though, it was his reckless destruction that first drew European scholars to seriously study Nubia's forgotten past. Sometimes even the most violent acts leave unexpected trails of knowledge, though it feels like knowledge soaked in sorrow. You stand before one pyramid now. It is steeper than any Egyptian one you've seen. The angle feels deliberate, as if the architects wanted to compress eternity into a sharper point. If you step closer, you notice faint carvings of gods, both familiar and strange. Amun, yes, but also local deities of the desert and the Nile. It's a fusion of two worlds, Egyptian influence wrapped around an older African core. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine your breath sinking with the rhythm of ancient builders hauling stones under a blistering sun. Inhale, exhale. Feel the ghost of their effort ripple through time to touch your chest. The quiet is almost hypnotic, but you sense layers beneath it. Rituals long forgotten, chants swallowed by the sand, and the hum of a culture that refused to simply copy its northern neighbor. The Nubians didn't just mimic Egypt. They reshaped it into something distinct, something steeper, sharper, more intimate. A small thought flickers in your mind, almost humorous. If Instagram existed back then, these pyramids might have been overlooked even in their prime. Too small to go viral, too subtle to dominate the ancient feed. And yet here you are, standing in their presence centuries later, feeling their weight more deeply than any algorithmic memory. The scholars who argue about their meaning still haven't agreed. Were the steep slopes meant to guide the soul more directly into the sky? Or did the builders simply prefer a different aesthetic, one more aligned with their own sense of beauty? The ambiguity lingers like a faint perfume, impossible to fully name. You run your fingers along the stone again. It feels warm, as if it's holding the day's sunlight deep within. You imagine a Kushite queen stepping into her pyramid for the last time, believing it to be a doorway rather than an ending. Remember, a whisper seems to rise from the sand. You too are a brief shadow between two eternities. You take another deep breath, slow and steady. Let the desert air stretch time itself. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the faint echo of the Nile, a reminder that even here, in the driest silence, life was once vibrant. Traders came with goods from India, Rome, and sub-Saharan Africa. The pyramids were never just tombs. They were markers of a kingdom connected to a web of worlds. And yet those worlds moved on, leaving these pyramids stranded like stranded memories. You glance back at the horizon, at the clusters of steep structures rising against the stars. They are smaller than Egypt's, yes, but somehow their intimacy makes them feel larger inside your mind. The night deepens. The sand cools beneath your feet. The pyramids remain silent. You linger in the quiet, letting the night wrap around you like a soft, ancient shawl. The stars above are sharp and brilliant, the kind of stars you almost never see in the modern world. They look close enough to touch, as if they are leaning down to watch you standing among the forgotten pyramids. You notice how the silence feels heavier here, denser somehow, like it carries more memory than the air you're used to breathing. You take another slow breath. Inhale deeply through your nose. Pause. Exhale gently through your mouth. The rhythm mirrors the way the desert once lived, slow and deliberate. Your mind drifts to the builders. Unlike the massive Egyptian workforce organized by pharaohs, Nubian pyramids were often smaller projects, sometimes built for individual rulers or families. They weren't sprawling national endeavors. They were personal statements of status, devotion, and hope for the afterlife. Some were even constructed quickly, as if the living knew they didn't have long to prepare for their eternal home. But here's where the story twists. Many Nubian pyramids hold surprises inside. Burial chambers with painted walls showing vibrant scenes of the afterlife. Processions of gods, offerings of food and drink. They weren't austere. They were alive with color, imagination, and belief. Historians have found evidence that the Kushites developed their own unique funerary art, even writing in a script now known as Meroitic, one still only partially understood. Scholars still argue whether this writing was truly a separate language or a localized form of Egyptian hieroglyphics transformed over time. The mystery remains, like a puzzle with half its pieces buried. Every mystery grows deeper when explained, Nietzsche once said, and you feel the truth of that now. The more you learn, the more the pyramids refuse to give up their entire story. There's a curious little anecdote you can't help but recall of a tomb excavated in the 1920s where archaeologists found not just gold jewelry, but also board games, combs, and even small cosmetic tools. Imagine that, a queen stepping into the afterlife prepared with eyeliner and a favorite game. It's strangely humanizing, isn't it? Beneath the towering stone and cosmic ambition, they were just like us, hoping to bring a piece of everyday life with them into eternity. You walk a little further and notice how the moonlight catches on one particular pyramid. Its tip is chipped, weathered. Perhaps a traveler long ago tried to take a piece of it as a keepsake. Or perhaps it's simply time doing what time always does, softening the edges of what we think is permanent. The air is cooler now. Feel it brush your skin, almost like a whisper saying, "Stay present." You let your shoulders relax. Your breath slows even more. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you can't help but imagine the soundscape of this place centuries ago. Priests chanting under the night sky, offering prayers to Amun. Families mourning their dead, but also celebrating their rebirth into another world. Traders passing by, their camels leaving faint trails that disappeared by the next wind. Now it's just you, listening to the silence they left behind. And here's a small, quiet irony. While Egypt's pyramids became global icons, drawing tourists by the millions, Nubia's pyramids were almost forgotten for centuries, left to the sand. They're smaller, yes, but also more numerous. Over 200 still stand. Yet even now, few can name them. It's as though they exist in a dreamlike echo, whispering their story only to those who choose to come closer. You think back to an earlier metaphor. Remember the idea of Instagram in the ancient world? How these pyramids might have gone unnoticed compared to Egypt's. It makes you smile faintly. Maybe that's the beauty of them. They weren't built for spectacle. They were built for something more intimate, a bridge between a single soul and the endless sky. There's a scholarly debate that drifts into your thoughts. Was Meroe's decline purely political, or did climate change play a role? Some argue the Nile's flood patterns shifted, making agriculture harder. Others suggest trade routes diverted, isolating the kingdom. The ambiguity feels almost comforting. Not everything needs a clear answer. Some things are better left to wonder. You place your hand against another stone wall. Its surface feels rough yet strangely warm, as though it remembers every hand that touched it before yours. You imagine the workers chiseling it, their sweat soaking into the earth, their voices murmuring in languages now lost. Are we really so different? You ask yourself silently. We too build monuments, skyscrapers, memorials, digital footprints, hoping someone will remember. But eventually the sands shift for everyone. You breathe again, slowly, deeply. The desert seems to breathe with you, exhaling centuries of quiet. In the far distance, you see more pyramids. They're clustered like stars fallen to the earth. You realize you could wander all night and still not reach them all. There's a quiet humor to that thought. You, a single person in the 21st century, standing here trying to make sense of an entire kingdom's relationship with death. It feels a bit absurd, yet strangely comforting. Absurdity and meaning always walk hand in hand, don't they? The night deepens even more. You feel the coolness of the sand through the soles of your feet. You feel the heaviness in your eyelids, the gentle pull of rest creeping in. The pyramids remain still, watching, waiting. You drift further into the desert, and the stillness becomes almost tangible, like a soft veil wrapping around your senses. There's no sound except your own breath, slow and deliberate, as if the air itself is ancient. You notice how the moonlight paints the edges of the pyramids, making them look even steeper than they are, like jagged mountains carved by invisible hands. Inhale slowly, hold for a heartbeat, exhale gently. You can feel your shoulders loosening, your thoughts softening, melting into the rhythm of this timeless place. These Nubian pyramids, smaller yet steeper than their Egyptian cousins, belong to a different rhythm of history. Many were built long after Egypt's Great Pyramid era had ended. Here in Meroe, rulers reinterpreted old traditions, making them their own. They kept the idea of the pyramid as a bridge between Earth and the afterlife, but reshaped it to fit their landscape, their beliefs. They didn't copy, they transformed. One mainstream fact floats into your mind. The kingdom of Kush ruled over both Nubia and at times Egypt itself. Imagine that reversal. Once thought of as a southern neighbor, Kush rose and conquered, placing its own pharaohs on Egypt's throne. The so-called Black Pharaohs of the 25th dynasty carried both traditions, leaving behind a hybrid legacy. Power was never a straight line. It was a loop, spiraling back and forth like the winding Nile. But among the stones, there's also a strange, haunting anecdote. In the late 19th century, an Italian treasure hunter named Giuseppe Ferlini came to Meroe and with no hesitation demolished the tops of many pyramids in search of gold. Imagine that, centuries of reverence reduced to rubble in days. And yes, he did find treasure in one, jewelry belonging to Queen Amenhotep. But at what cost? Many pyramids lost their original shape forever, their peaks shattered. You can almost hear the echo of stones collapsing in your mind, like a dream being erased. Man is the cruelest animal, Nietzsche whispered in his darker moods. And standing here, it's hard not to agree. You glance upward again, feeling the weight of history pressing down like the stars themselves. But even in ruin, the pyramids remain beautiful, their broken forms still reaching for the heavens. There's a resilience to them, a reminder that even when defaced, meaning lingers. Scholars still debate certain details. Were these steep pyramids influenced by local Nubian burial mounds, or did they remain a reinterpretation of Egyptian design? Did their proportions reflect a different cosmology entirely, something we haven't fully decoded yet? The arguments remain unresolved, like winds swirling around the same stones, never finding an end. And then, a faint smile crosses your lips as you recall another unusual detail. Some tombs contain small clay figures, known as shabtis, meant to act as servants for the deceased in the afterlife. Tiny guardians to help with menial tasks. Imagine being so practical in your belief that even death needed a workforce. There's something quietly funny about that. A cosmic to-do list being outsourced to little figurines. You walk closer to a partially buried entrance. Its doorway is narrow, framed by carvings so worn they're almost invisible. You imagine what it must have felt like to step inside centuries ago. The smell of incense, the flicker of torchlight on painted walls, priests chanting softly, weaving the soul of a king into eternity. And here you are, standing on the same ground, breathing the same air. Another breath, deep in, soft out. The night seems to deepen with you. Your fingers trail along the grooves of the stone. There's a kind of meditative simplicity in the touch. You think of Jung's words, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes?" And for a brief moment you wonder, are you looking outward at the pyramids or inward at your own sense of impermanence? Maybe both. The pyramids of Nubia aren't as polished, as celebrated, as postcard perfect as Egypt's. They're rougher, humbler, but maybe that's why they feel more intimate. They're like quiet conversations rather than grand speeches. They don't demand awe, they invite reflection. And here's a soft irony to savor. While the Egyptians wrote extensively about their tombs, leaving scrolls and inscriptions detailing rituals, the Nubian pyramids leave more questions than answers. In some ways, they are more mysterious precisely because they are less explained. Silence holds more secrets than words ever could. You sit for a moment on a smooth rock. The desert breeze brushes over your skin, cooler now, carrying with it the scent of sand and distant acacia trees. You close your eyes, feel the stillness. Let your breath deepen once more. If you listen carefully, you almost hear footsteps, phantoms of priests or mourners long gone. You imagine them carrying offerings, placing them gently inside, whispering prayers to gods whose names you only half remember. Time compresses, folds into itself. For an instant, the past feels closer than the present. There's a peculiar comfort in knowing that even great kingdoms fade. The Kushite kings who once commanded armies are now dust beneath these very stones. Their pyramids outlasted them, yet even they crumble. And one day the sand will claim them too. It's humbling, but not in a tragic way. more like a reminder that everything returns to stillness eventually. You breathe again, long, soft, steady. Let the air settle inside you like sand settling after a gust of wind. The horizon stretches endlessly, dotted with more steep, silent pyramids. Some look like tiny daggers against the sky, sharp yet small. They're closer together than Egypt's sprawling complexes, like a cluster of thoughts rather than a single monumental idea. It feels almost personal. You stand, brushing the sand from your hands. The moonlight catches on a faint carving, maybe a sun disk, maybe the curve of a goddess's face. You can't quite tell. It doesn't matter. You're not here for answers. You're here for the quiet, the mystery, the weight of time pressing lightly but unmistakably against your skin. And in that quiet, you feel sleep tugging at the edges of your awareness, like the softest tide. The desert exhales, and you exhale with it. You walk further along the line of pyramids, your feet sinking slightly into the cool sand. It feels softer now, almost like powdered velvet under your soles. The air carries a faint metallic tang, maybe from the weathered stones, maybe from the memory of ancient rituals. You can almost imagine a torch-lit procession winding through this place, shadows flickering like restless spirits. Take a slow, deep breath. In, hold, and release. Feel your jaw loosen, your brow soften. Let your shoulders fall a little heavier with each exhale. These Nubian pyramids are not scattered randomly. They cluster in small groups, like families keeping each other company through eternity. Many belong to queens, Amanitore, Amanishakheto, and others who wielded real power. Yes, in the kingdom of Kush, women often ruled as Kandakis, or warrior queens, commanding armies and negotiating with distant empires. It's a reminder that history isn't always what you expect. Empires often bend in directions that surprise you, especially when you're looking from the outside in. Here's a curious, almost whimsical anecdote. One of the Kandakis, Amenarenas, is said to have confronted the Roman Empire itself. When Augustus pushed Roman forces into Nubia, she fought back so fiercely that the Romans eventually negotiated peace rather than continue the campaign. Some say she even returned a captured Roman statue with its head neatly removed, an unspoken warning in stone. Imagine that, a queen in a desert kingdom outmaneuvering the great Rome. Power sometimes hides in unexpected corners. As you trace the outline of another pyramid, a question floats into your mind. Were these steep, compact structures meant to guide the soul more directly upward, like a shortcut to the afterlife? Historians still debate it. Some argue it was purely a regional aesthetic. Others believe the steep angles reflected a unique spiritual cosmology. But there's no final answer. Just speculation, like whispers carried on the desert wind. Truth is simple, Jung once wrote, yet the search for it is endless. You feel the truth of that here. These stones tell a story, but not the whole story. They leave spaces for silence, for doubt, for dreams to fill the gaps. You close your eyes and listen. The silence is not empty, it's layered. It carries the weight of centuries, the clinking of tools carving stone, the chanting of priests, the soft sobs of mourners. And deeper still, an even older silence before any pyramid rose here, before any kingdom was named. Breathe in, count to 4, exhale. Let your chest rise and fall with the desert's quiet rhythm. You notice something else about these Nubian pyramids. Unlike the sprawling Egyptian necropolises, the tomb chambers here are usually simple, smaller, closer to the surface. It's as if the Kushite kings and queens wanted to stay nearer to the living world, not completely buried under layers of stone. There's a tenderness to that thought, a refusal to fully sever ties with the earth. And here comes a touch of gentle irony. For all their reverence for the afterlife, For all their efforts to prepare for eternity, their treasures were eventually plundered, their names often forgotten. Yet the pyramids themselves remain, stubborn and silent. It's like the universe saying, your monuments are less permanent than you think, but I'll keep their outlines anyway. You remember the story of Giuseppe Ferlini again, the treasure hunter who lopped off the tops of some pyramids. Imagine him standing there in the 1830s, convinced he was outsmarting history. He found gold, yes, but he also unleashed centuries of debate and regret. Even his contemporaries thought his destruction excessive. And yet, in a strange twist, his greed also drew attention to Nubia, sparking interest in a history long ignored. A paradox. Ruin brought remembrance. As you continue walking, you see the faint silhouette of a modern village in the distance. Life goes on beyond these tombs, children playing, fires crackling, goats bleating softly. The pyramids are not sealed off from the present. They exist alongside it, quietly observing. Pause. Take another deep breath, feeling the air cooler now as night deepens. Let your spine soften. Let your hands rest gently at your sides. You can't help but think of how different this place feels compared to Giza. There's no tourist chatter, no blinding floodlights, just sand, stone, and sky. It feels almost like a secret, one the world hasn't fully noticed. And in that secrecy lies a kind of beauty. The carvings on some surviving chapels hint at a blended pantheon. Egyptian gods like Amun and Isis mingled with Nubian deities. Cultures don't exist in isolation. They bleed into one another like watercolors. Maybe that's why the pyramids look both familiar and foreign, echoing Egypt but speaking in a different dialect of stone. A faint smile tugs at your lips as you recall a quirky detail. Some tombs included beds for the dead, literal wooden beds, so the departed could rest in comfort. It's such a human touch, isn't it? Even in death, someone thought, let's make sure they sleep well. A reminder that care doesn't end with life. Nothing is ever truly lost, you murmur to yourself. The phrase feels right here. You step back and take in the cluster of pyramids again. Their steepness makes them look fragile, but they've endured for over 2 millennia. And you realize they're not just markers of death, they're markers of persistence. Even when kingdoms vanish, even when names fade, the desire to reach upward remains. Another breath, in, hold, out. Your eyelids grow heavier. The desert wind whispers over the stones. It almost sounds like a language. Maybe it is. Maybe it's the voice of the past, speaking in tones you can feel but not fully understand. You take one last lingering look before turning away. The pyramids recede into the distance, becoming dark shapes against the horizon. Yet you know they'll stay with you, like quiet thoughts that linger long after the conversation ends. As you walk back toward the edge of the necropolis, the stars above seem impossibly sharp, their light older than even these ancient kings. And you wonder, who will one day stand over the ruins of our own cities, breathing in silence, asking the same questions? The night answers with nothing but stillness. You drift deeper into the night, where the sand stretches endlessly and the stars hang like frozen sparks. The pyramids of Nubia are now behind you, but their presence lingers, a soft echo in your mind, like the memory of a half-forgotten song. Each step away feels both like a retreat and an approach to something else. Something quieter. Breathe in, slow, steady. Exhale. Let your shoulders release just a little more, like they have been carrying invisible weight and are finally ready to set it down. You picture the kingdom that once thrived here. Meroe, its capital city, humming with life, artisans hammering delicate goldwork, scribes scratching symbols onto ostrich eggshells, markets filled with spices and textiles. It was a civilization connected to the Nile, but not bound by Egypt's shadow. a place with its own voice, its own rhythm. And yet, history sometimes reduces it to a footnote. It's almost funny in a sad way. Think of how casually the world remembers the big empires, the Romans, the Egyptians, while others like Kush fade into the background. And yet the pyramids stand here, steeper and smaller, but no less deliberate, no less meaningful. The truth is, history isn't a straight line of greatness. It's a web, messy and overlooked in places. There's an anecdote you can't shake. In the late 19th century, a group of European explorers, disoriented by desert heat, reportedly mistook the Nubian pyramids for stone tents. Imagine the arrogance of arriving at something so ancient and thinking it temporary. But isn't that what we all do? We assume permanence belongs only to what we recognize. Every form is a message, Nietzsche once wrote, but the receiver may be deaf. Let that line settle as you inhale again. Hold the breath, feel it in your ribs, then let it drift out like a tide pulling gently away. The ambiguity of it all hums in your thoughts. Why build so many pyramids in such a compact space? Why make them so steep? Historians still argue. Some say it reflects an evolving theology, one more vertical in its symbolism. Others think it was simply practical, limited resources, tighter construction, and maybe both are true. Maybe meaning and necessity always dance together. The desert at night feels almost alive. You hear it, a faint rustling like soft silk, a distant cry of a nocturnal bird. Even the sand seems to breathe. You realize that what feels empty is never truly empty. It holds sound, memory, and even the weight of your own reflection. You think of how these pyramids, though forgotten for centuries, were never truly gone. They kept their secrets, waiting patiently until the world was ready to notice again. It's a reminder that not everything needs constant attention to endure. Some things simply are. Take another breath. Feel the coolness of the air in your throat. Your eyelids feel heavier now, your thoughts slower, softer. And yet there's one more tender detail lingering in the past. Some burial chambers contain bowls of food, water jars, even cosmetics, things the dead might need on their journey. Imagine someone carefully placing those offerings, their hands lingering for just a moment longer, unwilling to let go. It's such an intimate act, even across centuries. But then you remember what happened later. How many of these tombs were robbed, how the carefully placed gifts were taken, leaving only bare walls. It's a bitter truth. Even devotion is vulnerable, and still the pyramids themselves remain. Maybe that's the real lesson. Not everything lasts, but something always does. Pause. Let that thought settle like dust on stone. As you continue to walk, you catch sight of the horizon where the Nile would be, its dark ribbon glinting faintly under moonlight. That river tied everything together. The life of Nubia, of Egypt, of countless other civilizations. You realize it's still flowing, still carrying silt and secrets, outlasting even the kingdoms that worshipped it. In a way, you're like that river. You carry fragments of stories, of people, of forgotten names. You're made of everything you've seen and felt, but you keep moving. And maybe like the Nile, you'll leave behind something small that endures after you're gone. Nothing sleeps forever, you whisper. It feels true. Your body feels heavier now, softer, as though gravity itself is becoming a blanket. You're aware of your breathing more than your steps. Inhale, hold, exhale. Each cycle is slower than the last. The pyramids fade behind you, but their steep silhouettes still float in your mind. They stand as reminders that history is layered with quiet miracles. Queens who defied empires, artisans who shaped stone for eternity, whispers of a culture that refused to be erased. And now, as you prepare to leave this desert of memory, you realize you've been holding two truths at once, that everything ends and that somehow everything continues. The pyramids know the secret. So does the sand. So do you. The stars overhead pulse faintly, impossibly distant, yet somehow close. They watched over Nubian kings. They watched over the builders. They're watching over you now. And when you're gone, they'll still be there. One last breath, in through the nose. Hold, and out. The desert is quiet. Your mind is quiet. And as you close your inner eyes, the pyramids of Nubia remain. Smaller, steeper, but standing. Always standing. Now let all of this drift further into the background. You're no longer walking through sand, no longer tracing the edges of ancient stone. Instead, you're floating, weightless, suspended between memory and dream. The pyramids shrink in your mind's eye until they're just dots, tiny markers on the map of time. You realize they don't need you to remember them. They'll endure in silence the same way the stars endure without needing to be seen. And somehow that's comforting. So take another slow breath. Feel the air slide in gently, filling your lungs like a quiet tide. Hold it for just a moment, then let it go, smooth and easy. With each exhale, you let go of one more thought. The day fades. The questions fade. Even the need to understand fades. Now picture the softest light you've ever seen. It wraps around you like a thin veil. There's no rush, no expectation, just stillness. You're safe. You're quiet. You're already slipping into that threshold where wakefulness dissolves into something softer, like the desert at night, endless and calm. Let yourself rest. Let yourself drift. The pyramids will wait. The stars will keep watch. You don't have to do anything now but let go. Sweet dreams.